Hi there, I'm Tori Finlon, and I am your child's geometry teacher this year. So I'm going to go through a bit of a slideshow that talks about kind of the most frequently asked questions that I have with teaching geometry. And I'm also going to give you a little bit tour of our Schoology page. But before that, just a little bit of background about me. This is my 6th year teaching and my 5th year at IMS, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to teach geometry all 6 years of my teaching career. My first year teaching was down in Houston, Texas, while I was down there getting my master's in teaching. And then I moved back to Seattle and got a job here on wonderful Mercer Island. So to start off, I just want to quickly go back over the grading breakdown. So for grading, the vast majority of our grades come from assessments. So those tests and quizzes. So 85% of the overall grade is assessments. 10% comes from practice. Now, this practice is typically going to be in-class activities or assignments. I very rarely give additional homework. And then 5% on our final exam. This is a high school level honors class. So while IMS is moving towards 100% assessment and standard-based grading, we kind of have to be our feet in both areas. We're a middle school class, so we want to start adapting those standard-based grading practices, or I guess not middle school class, so high school class, but we're at the middle school. But we want to also make sure that we are still relatively in line with the high school, so we can't rock the boat too much. So assessments are the main focus, but we still need to include that practice and then the final exam, because at the high school, they give the finals, so we need to give finals as well. So what is a little bit different than in years past, and as we kind of incorporate a lot of these standard-based grading, is this chance for kind of not necessarily a retake, but a redo. So this is kind of an example from Unit 1. So Unit 1, we have 2 quizzes. So quiz number 1 was worth 30 points. Quiz number 2, which they're taking today, is worth 20 points. So let's say this student got a 20 out of 30 on quiz number 1 and a 10 out of 20 on quiz number 2. Initially, these quiz scores will go into Skyward as a counted grade. So the student maybe is not super pleased with the scores they got. But then they take the test, and although the test is taken on one singular day, it's going to be broken up into 2 parts that match those 2 original quizzes. So test number 1, they really studied and they got a 28 out of 30. Test part number 2, they studied that as well, and they got an 18 out of 20. So since they showed an improvement from the quiz to the corresponding section of the test, those quiz scores will turn into no counts in Skyward. Unless I really want to keep the score, then I can keep it as counted. But I think most of the time they'll want to turn it into a no count. So we're not really calling it a retake. It's just they get that chance to prove to me from quiz to test that they went back and studied, they understand the material, they understand what they did wrong. And so I'm giving them that chance to prove to me they did that, and then they'll get to choose to keep that test score rather than the quiz score. So what about practice and homework? As we slowly move towards standard-based grading, homework starts going away, grading practice starts being incorporated. So that's why homework, classwork, practice, and all that is only worth 10% of the grade. So most of the practice is going to be incorporated into notes and work days. So if it's a day that mainly it's notes, we'll take a little bit of notes, have some practice, maybe a little bit more notes, some more practice. There's other days that we're not taking notes and it's just a work day. So they might be working on an assignment. We may be doing a class activity, something that is practicing the material that we are learning. Anytime we do have classwork, if it's not completed during the class time, then the students are expected to complete that before the next day. So I'm not going to assign additional homework, but sometimes that classwork may turn into homework depending on how much time we had in class that day. Most of these practice activities will be entered Skyward as a no count grade. With standard-based grading, one of those practices is not grading the practices, it's really grading the assessment. So a lot of these activities, I would put the score in and then just mark it a no count so that they don't get penalized for practicing something new. But other times there may be activities that do get put into gradebook, but those will generally be a bigger assignment or a bigger activity where they have more time to work on it. And so the other thing is the algebra reviews. This is kind of the only thing that's really assigned outside of class. So those will be given on Mondays and they'll be due by that Friday. So they have the whole week to complete them. We haven't started them yet. I wanted students to get a little bit used to coming back to school before those jump into the mix. Because this week, well, maybe later, depending on when you're watching it, but this week is actually the first 5-day weekday of school since March of 2020. So I don't want to throw too much at them too soon, but these are going to be given on Mondays, due by Friday. And it reviews material from algebra that we often incorporate into the geometry units. With an honors geometry class, it is a lot more algebra heavy than a grade level geometry class, because we want to make sure students still remember their algebra so that they'll be really successful next year in honors algebra 2. So if I know that on that test, there's going to be a lot of quadratics, the algebra review will focus on quadratics, because I don't have, unfortunately, enough time during the year to teach everything or reteach all the algebra, but I do want to make sure students have that chance to prepare and practice before it pops up on a test. So the algebra reviews will be a way for students to practice that, and it gives them a couple days to kind of refresh their memory of that algebra. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was just a quick guide of our Schoology page. So some of these units students can't see yet because those are future units, but right now we're in Unit 1, which is Tools of Geometry. So these folders, they're going to have in-class work, which we haven't had any yet. The first unit is a bit of a fast-paced unit, so we haven't done a lot of in-class work yet. And then practice material would be any kind of optional worksheets that students can work on outside of class. So there's the worksheet, and then there's always the answer key. So on days where we do maybe a little bit of practice incorporated into our notes, but not any additional worksheets or assignments, I would always suggest students go home, find that corresponding practice material, and maybe do a couple problems from it. They don't need to do the whole thing, but if they're struggling with kind of these always, sometimes, or never true questions, they could open that up and try that. So those are there for students. When we get into algebra reviews, this folder will also have the algebra reviews. Now, I don't have videos listed here because how we're structuring this year and the schedule is slightly different than last year. But I also know, we're still in times of COVID, students may be out for sickness or quarantining. So if a student ever does miss class, especially for a long period of time, I do have all of my videos from last year, and I'm always happy to post them. I just don't have them available yet because they don't perfectly align with the schedule we're going at. But if your student is ever sick for a day or more and they would like to get a recap video, they can send me a message, and I am more than happy to share those videos from last year. And the last little bit is just the calendar. At the start of every unit, I will put on the calendar our quiz dates and our test dates so students have advance warning of when those are going to pop up. But that is pretty much it. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to message me. I'm more than happy to explain things further or clarify anything with you. But have a wonderful day or evening whenever you are watching this, and I'm looking forward to a great year.